Welcome to this episode of the IPUMS webinar series. My name is Jonathan Schrader. I'm a research scientist at IPUMS and a project manager on the NHGIS project. I'm really excited to give this overview today of the NHGIS project, which is the IPUMS source for geographic US Census data from 1790 to 2020. And that includes new data from the 2020 census and the 2020 American Community Survey. While I'm talking, my colleagues Dave Van Riper and Kari Williams are monitoring the Zoom Q&A and chat, and they'll be responding to some questions as we go and selecting some of those to share at the end in a Q&A. My plan today is to give a very broad overview of NHGIS, starting with the basic question, what is it? I'll move on into the data finder and do a quick walkthrough of how to find, select, and download the data. Then I'll circle back and show a few tips for how to explore what's available within the data finder. Moving ahead, I'll try to give a very broad tour to summarize the full scope of what NHGIS has to offer in terms of our summary tables, our GIS files, our time series and crosswalks. And at the very end, I'll say a bit about some new resources we have for an API and IPUMS our support. Finally, a little bit about our user support and time for Q&A. Okay. Before starting, I'd like to explain how this 2022 webinar relates to a couple previous NHGIS webinars, which we link to here on the current version of our NHGIS website. We'll likely keep all of these webinars available for some time, so you may want to know what you can gain from each of them. This new overview will have much in common with the 2018 intro. So there's going to be some overlap there. But as an overview, I'm aiming to be a lot broader than the intro. I'm planning to spend less time on time series tables because we have that previous webinar available. And because, most obvious thing, this is a few years newer than those webinars. I'll be able to update you on our latest releases, our latest features, and some upcoming plans. And I apologize for a little jumpiness in my screen. I am unable to use my keyboard to advance each slide, so I'm using the scroll on my mouse, and it's moving pretty quickly. What is IPUMS NHGIS? IPUMS NHGIS is one of several different projects here at IPUMS.org, which, as you probably know, IPUMS is a website. It is also a research unit of the University of Minnesota, where around 100 of us are working on large-scale harmonization and dissemination of both US and international data. Basically, we take census and survey data from different sources, from different times, and from different countries, and we standardize how the data are coded, documented, and formatted, making it easier to compare and analyze information from all our various sources. We also make it easier to find and download the data through several specialized data access systems. And NHGIS is one of those. The key thing that distinguishes NHGIS from the other IPUMS projects, NHGIS stands for the National Historical Geographic Information System, and what it contains are geographic US Census and survey data. That's distinct from microdata, which a lot of our other projects provide. Instead, NHGIS provides summary tables and GIS files, so very specifically geographic data, going all the way back to 1790. Now, if you're familiar with some of the other IPUMS projects, you'll know that they generally provide microdata, IPUMS USA, IPUMS CPS, IPUMS International, and the observation unit in microdata is a household or a person, typically. So you get all of the detail of specifically what responses a census respondent or survey respondent provided. And that gives a great deal of flexibility in how you classify, model, and cross-tabulate different characteristics of the population. But it comes with restricted geographic detail. Because there's so much detail in the microdata responses, in order to preserve the privacy of those respondents, typically microdata providers, at least in recent years, prevent the dissemination of detailed geographic data that would allow the complete identification of each household or person. So you're also limited in your sample size. For example, for a lot of recent censuses and the American Community Survey, you only get a fraction of all of the sampled respondents instead of the complete set, which is used when the Census Bureau or other census providers tabulate and publish summary data. They include the complete sample, and they can summarize data at very small levels of geographic detail. So in US Census data, these are the main units of analysis in the geographic summary data that we provide through NHGIS. And you start with nation level tabulations, but you can get all the way down to individual census blocks, which is a great deal more geographic specificity than in microdata. So for an example, this is block level data that was used by National Geographic in a mapping project they did a few years ago. And NHGIS includes data all the way down to the block level. They retrieve this data from NHGIS in part because we have all the block data and we can provide it for the complete nation in a single download. We also have time series and geographic crosswalks that make it easier to compare data across time, as in this illustration. And one caveat about NHGIS is that we are only primarily a data source and not a mapping or analysis tool. So if you need to create a map such as this, the way to do it is to obtain data from us and then download that and enter it into a software program like this, Esri's ArcGIS Pro. You could also open it in R, or QGIS is a free GIS software package. But here, for example, you can see a shape file from NHGIS that provides the geometric boundaries and definitions of the boundaries of block groups. And you can see a table file that includes data down here. Here's some entries in that table that includes data from, in this case, the 2011 to 2015 American Community Survey 5-year summary file for block groups. And I am really sorry about the jumpiness here. And that kind of information can be used to create all kinds of maps and has been used. For example, in this case, by our good friend Kyle Walker at Texas Christian created this interactive map where you can examine the segregation of people by educational attainment, where the red dots indicate persons with less than high school education, and the blue dots indicate graduate degrees, and this is in the Kansas City area. This was all obtained from exactly the data that I was just showing you. Another caveat and advantage about NHGIS data is that we provide nationwide extent data for just about all levels and all data. So you can get block group data for the entire country, as you can see in this illustration. We are also principally funded by the National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health, which means that we can provide all of our data for free with registration. Okay, so that's the overview of what we are. How do you use it? You enter into the NHGIS website at nhgis.org, and if you just want to go and get that data, you can push this button right here that says Get Data. And here is our data finder. At this point, you don't see a lot going on because, as it says, there are no filters selected. Let's see. Once you have selected a filter, you will see down below several different options for data you can select. And there are three main data types. The first type, which is called source tables here, are the basic summary tables that were provided by our original sources, with some modifications in some cases. In this case, we have some data for journey to work on that subject from 1960 and 70 and 80 and so forth. We also have 7 time series tables covering different aspects of travel time to work and means of transportation to work for different periods of time and different geographic levels. And these are, the time series tables are custom made by NHGIS, linking together common statistics across time. And we also provide GIS files going all the way back to 1790 for states and counties, and in this case, 1960 for census tracts. Our census tract boundaries actually go all the way back to 1910, but only 1960 for this particular subject, journey to work. So to proceed, I want to consider this example and see how would we get the data that we need to produce a map like this. I would select filters. I can select and apply multiple filters at the same time. So I've selected block group, this year range 2011 to 2015, and educational attainment. And with these selections, I can see 17 source tables available. And looking for just the most typical one, I might click on the popularity header, which resorts the listing according to how popular each table is downloaded from NHGIS users, which brings to top the simplest and most complete educational attainment that's provided for this period of time and this level. And if I then want to add that to my data cart, I would click on this plus button, which then adds that to my data cart, and I can continue to look for GIS files. In this case, I would add the US shapefile that covers all block groups in the US. I could alternatively just select a single state. And then once I have those things in my data cart, I can click continue to go to this options page where I can potentially add additional levels to my table request. And I can also potentially look for other spatial breakdowns. I'll talk a little bit more about those later. Once I continue, then I see on this page that I need to select geographic extents. This is a somewhat hidden feature on our site. I did say that all of our data is provided for the whole nation. That is true for the most part, but for blocks and block groups, you have an additional option to select specific states that you would like instead of the entire nation. Because this is a block group request, I can select which areas I would like to include. And in this case, I would select all and continue. So importantly, this is how you select extent for tables, specifically source tables. As we saw earlier, to select a specific extent for GIS files, I would do that earlier in the process. We are working right now on a plan to standardize and simplify how that's presented to users, but I'm not sure when we'll be able to put that out. So right now, this is how it works. And before I submit my request, I can add a little description here to what my data contains so that if I ever want to come back and get this data again, I would be able to find it based on its description in my account. And so I click submit, and every single request is associated with a particular user. And in order to use IPUMS websites, you do need to register with us. We ask you to agree to some terms of service, which is for NHGIS, just that you cite us when you use our data, and that you do not redistribute it to others without permission. And we often do give permission for lots of different types of redistribution. So feel free to reach out if that is something that's of interest to you. When you submit your request, you'll be on this page then, your extracts history page or my data. This lists all of the requests. I've made 892 up to date. And when I initially get to this page, I'll see this circle spinning, indicating that the request is being prepared by our system. And when it is completed, it will turn into this completed status. And there will be two buttons here. Because I requested both tables and GIS files, I can download those separately. Or if you just request one or the other, there'll be one button here. Download that. They come down in zip files that you can then unzip on your computer and load into software, like this. Okay, so backing up a little, I'd like to show some features that can help you see what's available and learn more about the data as you search our site. You can't actually see the data within our website. As I said, we're not a mapping or analysis tool, but you can learn a lot about the content of the data before you download it. And one of the simplest things you can do when you're looking at source tables is to click on the name of a table, and you will get the complete listing of the variables in that table, the variables in that table and the universe that it covers. The variables in summary data are a little different than variables in microdata. A variable in summary data is a summary statistic, such as the total count of males or the total count of males enrolled in school for each block group or other area. We have several different classes. We break down those variables for you into separate classifications. So basically, this is a cross tabulation of a few different concepts. And to see any individual dimension of that cross tabulation, you could click on these to see, for example, the 2 educational attainment categories that are used in this table, or the 16 educational attainment categories that are used in the next table. So we've pulled that out so you don't have to look at the complete variable list to interpret that. You can learn more about the source data set by clicking on that. And you can learn about different breakdowns that might be available for a data set. A lot of census data sets are provided as each individual table is available both for the total area and the total population, but also for specific sub areas or subgroups. So I could get this table not only for the entire area, but also potentially for urban or rural parts of each area. Now, that's not true for block groups, but it is true for some higher levels within this data set. So that lists which those options are. I would point out that as you look at these other data types, there's other underlined characteristics that you can also click on and get more information, such as the basis in the GIS files, or several different concepts and time series tables. I won't go into detail with those. Backing up a little farther, looking at the individual filters you can pop up, starting with geographic levels, you can see we have a large number of levels available. The census produces data for all types of summary levels. And this is a complete list of our most popular requested levels. You can click farther down to get different subgroups of levels. Here you can see all the different types of metropolitan and urban area definitions across time. This lists which years those different concepts have been in use. You can also click on anything in green text here to get an additional pop-up to see more information about that level and which data sets it's used in. Moving on to, you can also get a different type of summary level, which is what we call a compound level. And that is, if you click on this area up here, show that again. Sorry, I just won't go back. Here we go. You can click on show compound levels, and going forward, here we go. And now I need to go back. Here we have new levels that appear when you show compound levels. This is metropolitan areas by state, which is the parts of metropolitan that are areas that are in each state. For example, here I'm in Minneapolis. Our metropolitan area extends into Wisconsin. If I just wanted the Minnesota part of that metropolitan area, I could click on this and then use this level. All right, another filter is years. this is fairly straightforward. You can see that there are 5-year ranges for the newer 5-year ACS summary files, and non-decennial years for some of our data that's not from the decennial census. Moving on to topics, you can see we have a very large range of topics available. You can click on different subgroups of topics.
Jonathan, I'm briefly interrupting to ask if you could zoom in just a bit.
Okay.
It might not work without that keyboard.
No, I'm afraid this is, yeah, it's going to be a lot of small text, and I apologize for that. These are screenshots and not actually on the web, so I can't easily zoom in. I hope you have an opportunity to view this on a larger screen at some point. My apologies for the small text. I don't think in most cases that you need to be able to read all of it. I'm trying to mostly present an overview of the full range. So what I'm trying to present is not so much all of these specific details, but sort of the range of options that are there. So with that in mind, I'll just proceed. And again, I apologize for the small text, and also for the jumpiness of my
Well, I've interrupted you already, Jonathan. I think
Yeah.
if you click on the scroll button on the mouse, it will stop scrolling so wildly for you.
If I click on that scroll button.
Press down on the scroll button on top of the mouse, like you would click a mouse.
Okay, well, that didn't advance it, but maybe it changed the speed. Okay, once again, you can click on any of these the green text and learn more about a particular data set group. This describes all of the data sets in that group and what types of data and what our sources were for that data. All right, that concludes the demo section. Over the next 20-25 minutes, I'm going to give a big overview of our main data and documentation resources. And here it goes, skipping ahead again. I apologize. So starting with summary tables, our source tables. If you want to know more about what's available, a good place to go is back to our main page and click on data availability. And here we have summaries of data availability for all of the main NHGIS data types. There is also a detailed matrix of data availability. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll find a data availability by topic and source. And again, this is very small text, but I mainly want to highlight what's available so that you can go back and find it yourself if this is of interest to you. But this is a PDF file that lists by topic and by source data set, including years, when there is availability for different types of summary tables. All right, some bigger text. This is summary tables by level. I wanted to give a very high level overview of what you can get for different years. Up until 1900, almost all of our summary tables are only available for states and counties, and sometimes the nation level. Starting in 1910, we have data for census tracts. And then starting in 1970, we have summary tables for all census levels down to blocks. 1970 was the first year that the Census Bureau produced digital sources of their data. And so we have a very complete set of summary tables for many different levels. There's one caveat here that I want to share is that census tract coverage grows over time, starting in 1910 for only 8 cities, the largest, basically the largest 8 cities. It grew over time. By 1980, it covered most large metro areas. And in 1990, it was the first year that census tracts were completely nationwide. Most of the data is just from the Census of Population and Housing or American Community Survey, but we do in NHGIS have data from many other sources. This is mostly for states and counties in earlier years. We also have a special product that we constructed called Environmental Summaries, which is available on a separate page. And you can find that through this link or through the main menu on our front page. That includes summaries for counties and census tracts of land cover and precipitation and temperature. Other places you might go for more information about summary tables is the overview of data sets, which includes a summary of each and every data set that we have of summary tables and the descriptions of each data set group. Moving ahead, we have also a page that provides source documentation, the original census files and documentation from our secondary sources for historical data. And forthcoming, you may be curious about what's coming up. ACS data, American Community Survey data, is the source, the census source of what used to be in the long form of the census, the large questionnaire on educational attainment, marriage, income, employment, things like that. That is a survey that is conducted continuously all year round, and they put out two different types of data products each year, a 1-year summary file and a 5-year summary file for summary data. The 1 year comes out in September and the 5-year in December, and the plus here indicates that NHGIS usually has that data out within a few weeks after the original census release. The more interesting, unusual thing you may be waiting for is 2020 census summary data. The next round of 2020 census summary files will be out in May 2023, a full year from now. We currently have on our website the first release of 2020 census summary data, which is the redistricting data that has a very limited scope of subject detail. It includes race and ethnicity data and a little bit on group quarters population and housing occupancy, and just one age category. So you can't get more detail from the 2020 census until at least May 2023, and we'll have that out as soon as we can. After that, there will be additional releases. The DHC replaces summary file 1 from previous censuses. The detailed DHC replaces summary file 2 with iterations of many specific race and ethnicity categories. And then the supplemental DHC will include counts of household relationships and other relationships between population and households. That's going to be, those files will be coming out starting in August 2023, according to the current plans. Why is it delayed so much? A big reason why it's delayed so much is that the census is currently implementing a wholly new scheme for protecting privacy in its census summary files. And this scheme involves injecting noise into the data, random noise, to make it harder for people to reconstruct individual characteristics from the published tables. And NHGIS has a very special and very useful resource that can help you assess the significance and size of that noisy, random added error. We have this page that provides privacy protected census demonstration data for the 2010 census. Right now, to support users who are interested in how this will work, the Census Bureau is publishing new versions of 2010 census data with new versions of their disclosure avoidance system. So they're injecting noise into the 2010 statistics, which users can then download from our site and compare directly with the originally published 2010 summary data to assess how large the errors are that they have added. You can check out this page if you'd like to know more. Our GIS file resources, a good place to learn more about that is again in the data availability section. If you click on the GIS files section and go down to that, you will see a large matrix that provides all kinds of details about which types of files are available in which years for which levels. And I won't go into all the details here. Again, a lot of small text, but a few things to highlight. Most of these are boundary data. They represent polygons within a GIS, the actual areas of each of these units. We have a few special types, including place point files that go back to 1900. And you can see 3 different vintages of place points here in northern Georgia. These could be combined with some of the microdata products from IPUMS USA to map and locate different people from earlier censuses. We also have centers of population, which is provided by the Census Bureau only as latitude and longitude in a text file. We have converted these into shape files so that they're easier to load into a GIS. And the difference between a center of population, these are county centers of population being used to represent the total population of each county, and compare that to what a typical GIS will do when you map county data using proportional symbols. Usually those symbols will be placed in the middle of each county or in a large section of the county, which actually displaces that circle from where most people live. You can see with the centers of population that these circles are actually very consistent with the urban area locations where people live. So these centers give you a much better idea of the actual population distribution. You can see how this one, which is the middle of Nye County, Nevada, is moved down to the urban area within Nye County, which is much closer to Las Vegas, for example. You can also use these to do sort of variations on dot mapping at the census tract or block group level. I recently posted a blog about that, which you can find on the IPUMS blog site here at blog.popdata.org. Other places to learn more about GIS files, we have a special page that's just provides documentation about our GIS files. And farther down on that page, you'll find our newest addition to our GIS file collection, which is our 1980 block boundaries. We are working steadily with several assistants right now, plowing through old versions of Census Tigerline data, the 1992 Tigerline files, the very first digital boundary data that the census produced, included 1980 block data, but they were badly incomplete. So we are using 1980 block maps to improve that data and correct it so that it is consistent with our available 1980 summary data. We have completed and released boundaries for 48 metropolitan areas. These are the largest that we currently have. Internally, we're right now reviewing our Los Angeles data and working through New York, and we hope to have a few more large metros out by the end of the summer. Okay, something that I have left to close to the end, because as I said, we have another webinar about this, is our time series and crosswalks. I'm going to be short on it, but I really think it is one of the most valuable things that NHGIS adds. Despite that, it's just that you can find out more elsewhere. But in a nutshell, at a high level, where you can go to learn more is this page on our site. Time series tables provides a complete overview of what time series tables are and how we constructed them, what their coverage is. What they look like when you download one is something like this. This is a state level time series table of marital status counts. And you can see how there is one row for Alabama that includes 1970, 1980, 1990, and so on. We have combined data from multiple census years, and we have standardized the categories used in those counts. In some cases, we sum data together from the original tables in order to make every count consistent across time. This particular table uses a type of integration we call nominal integration to match areas across time. In this case, we have merely matched on the names of states. And that makes a lot of sense for states because their boundaries don't change very much. In this case, this is a nominally integrated census tract time series table. And you can see there's a lot of blanks here because census tract codes come in and out of existence across time. So when we link those just by name across time, they don't exist in every year. A single code might exist in just 3 years and then disappear. That could be still useful if you'd like to map each individual year and create, a series of snapshot maps or something like that. But very often people want to measure change over time. within each tract. And for that, we have geographically standardized data where we have standardized the geographic units to 2010 census geography. Each row in this case represents a 2010 vintage census tract. And we have, starting from 1990 block data, we have allocated the 1990 block data to 2010 census tracts as best we could and estimated what portion of the block data was in each 2010 census tract, giving this estimate. We did the same thing for 2000, and we provide an upper and lower bound depending on how well the blocks nested within each 2010 tract. I won't go into more detail about how we did that or show you examples. I'll just summarize here what's currently available. We have recently updated our geographically standardized time series to include 2020 data. So we now have, 1990 to 2020 data for 2010 census units at 10 geographic levels, down to tracts and block groups and zip code tabulation areas. So you can do analysis at those levels for 4 different census years across time. Currently, we have about 1,600 time series in 111 standardized tables. But because our standardization method is designed to be producing as accurate of data as possible, we start only from block data, and the Census Bureau has published data at the block level only from short form census data. The short form goes out to everybody in the country. It is what you probably, or you or someone in your household filled out for the 2020 census. It's a very short list of questions, but they produce data at the block level for that. So that includes race, ethnicity, age, sex, household size, relationships, and things like that. It does not include income, education, and employment. For that data, we provide nominally integrated time series data where we just match geographies by name across time. We currently have 5,700 time series in 273 nominally integrated tables. So this covers a much broader range of subjects, including all of these different long form subjects. We provide those for 8 different geographic levels. The years are mostly in the range from 1970 through 2020. We have added 2020 decennial census data where possible. And we have extended our data to include both the 2012 5-year ACS data and the 2019 5-year ACS data. We hope to add all of the 5-year ACS periods soon. If you need standardized long form data, or you need standardized data for a subject that's not currently covered in our time series table, we have another product called Geographic Crosswalks. And you can find that on our webpage under supplemental data right here. The levels that are available in our crosswalks are blocks, block group parts, and block groups to these other areas for these years. What this means is we have a file you could download, in this case, right here, that would show relationships between 1990 blocks and 2010 blocks. And it would include an interpolation weight, the actual weight that we use to construct our time series tables. We use some advanced modeling to estimate where people and housing units are within each 1990 block and figure out and estimate what portion of each 1990 block was in each 2010 block. And you can use these to allocate data from 1990 or from 2000 or from 2020 to 2010 census areas. And with these crosswalk block group parts are the smallest units that are available in the summary files from 1990 and 2000 that include long form data, marital status and education and employment, etc. So you can get data for block group parts from our website for 1990 or 2000, and you can allocate them to 2010 versions of these units. Or for ACS data, the smallest unit that the ACS summary data includes are block groups. So we have block group crosswalks for more recent years. We have a lot more detail on that page about how we recommend you use our crosswalks and some guides and tips about using them. I won't go into those details, just know that it's here. And to conclude my presentation, I just want to show a few additional resources we are working on and adding for users who would like to have programmatic access to our extract system so that you don't have to go through the point and click that I just demonstrated a little while ago. We have an API, and we have a website that provides a lot of documentation and examples of how to use the API so that you can access it from Python or R. And we also have an R package called IPUMS R that helps users load data into R from IPUMS. That's not just for NHGIS, but also for the microdata projects. And we are working right now on extending the IPUMS R package so that it will allow you to actually define and make requests of our data access system, so that you could, maybe have a particular request that you like to make every year when ACS data comes out. It'd be very easy to update it to get data for the next round of 5-year ACS data when it's available. And you could do that all within R. We hope to make those updates very soon. And if you're interested, reach out to us. We'll announce it on our website and through our usual channels. To find those things, you can look down under in the user guide area of our website, in this area called For Developers and R Users. Here's some links to those things. And to close, I just want to highlight the section of our website where you can find out more. So here's on the main page. I'm going to zoom into the bottom area here. There's a revision history, so you can keep track of everything, all of the updates we're making over time, see how things have changed, what's new. There's an FAQ. There's the user guide page I was just showing you. And very importantly, there's a user forum where you can submit questions that you have about any of our data or our access system. And our user community and our user support team monitors that regularly. So we are usually fairly quick to respond if we can. There's some information on how to cite us, how we recommend you do. You can look up other research that has used IPUMS and NHGIS. And then, of course, over here, we have a lot of news items about what we have recently added. If you have any additional questions that aren't answered within the forum, you could reach out to us directly at nhgis@umn.edu. Particularly if you would like to redistribute our data, we recommend you email us there. Or you can follow us on Twitter to get all of the latest updates. One other place for user resources is on the main IPUMS site under the support tab. There are some teaching resources and training exercises that are additional to what we have on the NHGIS site. All right, that concludes what I had to present today. My last note is just to thank our funders for what we are able to provide to you. And I hope you find it useful, and I'm looking forward to hearing what kinds of questions you have.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dave Van Riper. I work with Jonathan here at IPUMS, and I have been monitoring the chat and the Q&A. And Jonathan, I've got some questions that have come in that I thought I would run by you to do in a live Q&A. So let me find those in my list. Okay, so the first question that came in, which you hit on at the end, is maybe you'll go over this, but for the time series tables, are they adjusted to a certain year of geography, i.e. all in 2000 geography or 2010 geography, or do you have to adjust for that on your own?
Right. So there's two different types. of time series tables. With the nominally integrated time series tables, you would have to adjust if you want to ensure that you're measuring data for a consistent geographic footprint. Of course, for some cases, maybe, for the city of Austin, Texas, for example, its boundaries are changing frequently. You may want a time series that is just Austin as it was defined in each year. So that would be the advantage of the nominally integrated time series. With the geographically standardized, yes, it is standardized to a particular year. And right now it's 2010. In the future, at some point, we expect to update that so that we are also standardizing to 2020 census units, but I don't have a timeline on that right now.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. The last question that came in is probably one, and we have a webinar on this. That's something that you could talk about for quite a long time. But it's could you talk about the crosswalks and generating standardized data across multiple census years? Anything you'd like to expand on from what you said previously? We've got a couple of minutes left on that, but anything of interest that you want to talk more about?
Yeah, sure. I threw in a couple extra slides just in case. One thing about our crosswalks that I really like to emphasize is we really recommend that people start from the smallest possible units. And so I talked about this a little bit, that we start from blocks. These two maps illustrate a key difference between our approach and another product, the longitudinal tract database, which provides a tract-to-tract crosswalk. On our site, we haven't yet provided a tract-to-tract crosswalk. We plan to eventually, because some data is only available at the tract level or higher. But for most data that people want to standardize, you can get that data for smaller entities than tracts. You can get it down to block groups or down to blocks. If you start with tract data and you disaggregate using a single crosswalk, in this case, we started, this is 1990% black in 2010 tracts. There was one 1990 tract here. And if you use a tract-to-tract crosswalk to allocate the count of black population and the total population from this 1990 tract to each of these 2010 tracts, you'll do it in the same proportion to each 2010 tract. You'll basically be assuming a uniform population characteristics throughout the tract, which results in a map like this, where every single 2010 tract has an exactly the same rate of percent black. So we really emphasize trying to start from the smallest units whenever you can. And we have more guidance on our crosswalk page to show how to do that. In this case, if you start with block level data, you're aggregating up from the smallest 1990 units to the larger 2010 tracts. And you get a much more accurate picture of the true segregation that occurred in this area. I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess I'd want more guidance on if there's other questions people have about that before I continue on.
Maybe Jonathan, maybe just say a little bit more about if you want to, about the crosswalks we've built, maybe some of the weights that we've constructed that are a little more nuanced than some products that are out there, and then potentially some of the difficulties in using those crosswalks. In other words, they're quite big, quite large, and maybe quite challenging to use.
Oops, here we go. Yeah, okay. They are very large. We don't recommend you try opening the crosswalks in Excel. They're not really designed for that, especially the block-to-block crosswalks are over 10 million in records in size for the entire country. Another unique feature of our crosswalks for larger units, for the block groups and block group parts and the tract crosswalks, when we add them, we will have multiple interpolation weights available for each intersection. So for a given, let's say, a 2010 block group that intersects a 2010, or a 2010 block group that intersects a 2020 block group, part of the population of the 2010 block group belongs in part of the 2020 block group. How much? Well, we use block level data to estimate the portion of the 2010 block group that's in that 2020 block group. And at the block level, we don't have to restrict ourselves to just population. At the block level, we also have housing unit counts and household counts and family counts and population by age and a few other things. So in order to create a crosswalk from block groups to block groups, we create different weights for different block level characteristics. We can say that, let's say 40% of the population of blocks within this block group lives in this 2020 block group, but only 10% of the households live in that block group. And that may be because there's lots of group quarters in this area. So the population number is higher than the household number because group quarters aren't households. And it may be that there's a large number of families in one part of the block and a large number of adults in another part, and different variations like that. So we provide additional weights so that depending on what you're trying to standardize, whether it's median household income or housing tenure, you can use a different weight for each of those.
Great, thanks. And Jonathan, we've got a couple other questions that have come into the Q&A, and this one relates very closely to what you just talked about. Do you have to use weights to use the crosswalks?
Not in the way that you might be thinking of with microdata. You do need weights because, let me see if I can try to parse where this user is coming from. There are weights that you use when you estimate population characteristics from microdata, because microdata are a sample of the entire population. So each record is meant to represent a larger number of people than a single record. So you use this weight, a population weight or a household weight, to multiply the data to represent a larger portion of the population. It's not that with the crosswalks, but it's something similar, because if I have a single 2010 block group, some of its population might be in one 2020 block group, some of it in a different 2020 block group. In order to estimate the 2010 characteristics of 2020 block groups, I need to weight each 2010 block group's characteristics differently. So I might take 40% of this 2010 block group and add it to this 2020 block group. And I take 60%, I take the other 60% and put it in a different block group. And that's how the crosswalks work. I hope that's clear.
That's great, Jonathan, thanks. I'm paying attention, we're now 1 minute past the hour. I tried to answer a couple of the last questions that came in.
I'll unmute here briefly and just
yeah.
note, because of the last question that came in, we will post a written version of the Q&A along with the video recording. So keep an eye out for that in the next week or two.
And we will try to pull out some of the hyperlinks and other things that have come into the chat. We'll try to include those in the written Q&A as well. Well, thanks, Jonathan, so much for the presentation, and thank you to everyone who attended. Thanks, Kari. I don't know if you have any more last words for people, but that was a really engaging presentation, and lots of questions and answers. Thank you all for participating and throwing those into the chat box. It was really great.
Yeah, thanks everyone for participating. Really, really happy to be able to do this.